We're going to talk about great user experiences, the counterpoint to that. So, great user experiences versus successful monetization perspective. And we have Eric and Tim who are going to come up and do a little fireside chat on the very subject. Come on up, Eric. Thanks.
All right, let's get started. So we're here with Eric and Tim, both one at Embrace, one at Backbone, both more like on the technology side now. But both of them worked at Scopely. One worked at Twitch. So my name is Eric. I don't know if anybody knows me here, but I'm on the podcast Deconstructor of Fun every week, talking a lot of trash about Apple and other people in the industry, Embracer, anybody that pisses me off, like Ubisoft, whatever. I'm a consultant for both hedge funds as well as for some industry like Warner Brothers, et cetera. So I've been doing this like 25 years. So usually I'm the one that's giving hot takes, not doing a panel, but you know,
we like hot takes.
I'll do my best to let them talk. So first, I guess we'll go to Eric, who I just met. What's your background and what are you doing now?
My name is Eric Futoran, multi-time founder. I founded Scopely, where I built the publishing business, which obviously they've grown beyond my wildest expectations. The publishing for me was the IP, building the right game teams, understanding UA, and some of the dynamics we'll talk about today. I also helped found Max, which then became the ad server of record for AppLovin. So I can talk ad tech as well, the hidden arts. And then built Embrace, my current endeavor. Embrace helps mobile teams really understand what's going on from a stability and from an analytics so that engineers can dive into a problem. Let's say one of the hot topics of today is Google Play starting to monitor ANRs. We help you, they identify them. We help you actually decide when they're a real problem and how to resolve them. And so that's true for anything that an engineer or a mobile team, especially in games, needs to prioritize to build better user experiences.
You're not wrong.
Okay, and then we have Mr. Tim, who also worked at Scopely.
Nope, didn't work at Scopely.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I wish.
Niantic and Twitch, where, Niantic, you were relatively early? Or?
No, I was a little bit later, but so my career is, so I started off at a company called Kress, where I ran our whole PHP Linux stack, so I was the creator of Gamepedia, if you remember that platform. After that, I helped run the foundation team that built out kind of the new Curse app, which had Curse Voice. We were later acquired by Twitch. There I was on the game dev side, so I did a lot of things about bringing Twitch and game devs together, which was really fun. After that, I went and ran production and engineering for Pokemon Go, and now I'm the VP of software for Backbone, which is a mobile game controller that turns your phone into a console. So that's what I'm doing now.
Awesome.
So I'm more of the engineering side, so this will be an interesting, discussion.
I can pretend, but I'm not allowed to do PRs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would just say no to them. It's okay.
And I don't know shit about tech, so I'm just a business person. So anyway, this is an age-old question that we've been trying to answer for like the last 12 years since mobile really and free-to-play started taking off. Is like the balance between user experience and monetization design, and how does that balance work? And some people do it really well, and some people don't do it well. I think a lot of free-to-play games are optimizing around monetization design to the detriment of gameplay. And those games tend to be more successful. Something like Monopoly Go, and Scopely would not be happy with me saying that, but that is the truth. So anyway, that's kind of what we're talking about. And so I guess my first question to either of you is, how do you define like user experience in mobile versus monetization?
Yeah, I'd like to turn this on its head. We were kind of talking about this earlier. So for all of us, when we build games, we think of games as a fun endeavor. We want to build beautiful experiences. And to some extent, that's what we're most proud of. Like you sit on a plane and you see someone playing your game, and I see someone playing Yahtzee or Monopoly Go, which I didn't build, but obviously has done tremendously well off the publishing business at Scopely. That's what you endeavor for, but at the heart, that's bullshit. What you're really trying to do, and I think of it as like the core equation, is LTV, lifetime value of your users, versus the effective CPI, how you acquire them. And if you can get that equation right, you get a flywheel. And so player experience is defined by that flywheel. You have to earn the right to continually build games. And so while we endeavor to build beautiful games and fun games, it's not the definition that a core game developer generally thinks about. If you do that and you stick on that route, your company will fail, unless you're Pokemon Go, which you'll talk about. But the core is the core is thinking about these principles from the get-go. It's how do you monetize? Obviously, how do you acquire? Building the game loops to fit that, whether it's a coin dozer or a turn-based asynchronous or other game, and making sure that you build a game so that it has a life and that can continue to run. And those are, I hate to say it, they're fun games. I play them all the time. They're not necessarily our definition of beauty and player experience. So player experience is getting the player to come back, making sure they want to come back, and then they define what player experience is. You do not. And the game developers that come to me and say, this is the experience I'm building, I tell them to go away. It's not the way you build games.
Which, as we were discussing, is completely different than how we approach Pokemon Go, which is when you step back and think about it, it's like, well, it's Pokemon, right? It's one of the largest IPs in the world. However, when we were planning out whole roadmaps for the next year and when we started kicking off seasons and that, our mind wasn't in, okay, how do we squeeze our players or how do we get the most out of it? We actually started from the aspect of, okay, what do we want to do? What do we want the players to feel? Well, how do we want players to interact with each other, with the real world, with the Pokemon, because they are your companions. And that's how we looked at the problem. We didn't think about monetization first. We built a feature called, as an example, Postcard Book. When we started that, we started from, okay, we had people going around to POIs and all this. I can't go into the full details, but that was our start, right? And then it wasn't until we had gotten the game loop into something what we thought was fun and added some more detail, that then it was like, okay, how are we gonna, do we wanna monetize this? Are we gonna monetize this? And then we would take a look and say, okay, well, most people will take them X number of days to fill up their postcard book, because the whole point is you want to remember these moments in life. And so we had a formula that kind of worked it out to was, the peak. And they were like, well, if people want more, they can buy more pages. And that's how we monetized it. And so that added to our flywheel in a sense. So we actually approached it from what is fun, what is intuitive, what is for the user, and then figured out how to monetize afterwards.
And to be clear,
Don't do that.
yeah, don't do that. Do not do that. People use these as examples, particularly Fortnite, right, as a way of everyone should do cosmetic economies, but that does not work unless it's at scale. And similar to Pokemon Go, that's a bad thing. Or people make MOBAs, which inherently don't monetize well because it's all cosmetic economies, and they're competing against the biggest games on the planet, right? So anyway, that's a bad example. So let's talk about a good example.
I don't know if it's a bad example. How does different?
How did Scopely? They seem to be the best at balancing both user experience as well as monetization. How do you think that worked out, or why do you think it worked out for Scopely more than anybody else, or not more than anybody else?
Yeah, there's two pieces. So I brought the LTV CPI. I mean, at the core, and everybody says it, but then no one really follows it. It's the core KPIs of your game. I think of it as we have life equations, like E equals MC squared. That's your equation. LTV greater than eCPI, and if it falls out of balance for every cohort, you're screwed. So I think of it that way. How do you think about it from the beginning is deciding how you look at the not creative endeavor of thinking about the flywheel, focusing on it, making it go as fast as possible. If you're a turn-based asynchronous game, your goal is to have as many turns per day as possible, right? People will get addicted to your game. They will like it because they keep coming back. That's your KPI, and then everything else around it is built in. Your monetization, which could be ads or non-ads. It's your user acquisition with virality or organics. It needs to be built into that flywheel. And so when we were building Scopely, part of it came from my lifeblood. I was an ad tech guy before Scopely. It's part of the reason I started Max. But even that's a trade-off. But it's a great trade-off. You need ads for certain styles of game to make sure that they work. Monopoly Go doesn't have ads. It's purposeful. While Yahtzee does. You need to make your LTV as high as possible, and then you make those trade-offs. Everybody makes a face at ads because it's not amazing for player experiences generally. They crash. They have bad performance. They're third-party SDKs. It's part of the reason Embrace exists. At the same time, you have to use them to make the trade-offs so that users will continue to come back, and you have to earn that right. So they'll watch ads. a lot of users actually don't mind them. And in fact, like rewarded ads, for instance. And so you build that into the game from the beginning.
Which is funny because you talk about KPIs and what, ensuring nothing goes out of balance to where your game would die. We also had to do that. We also had the same KPIs we had to look at. And you still have to look at CAC, you still have to look at all that. And it's just interesting to hear that that's where you start from versus you start from the gameplay, which, again, from a fundamental standpoint, I absolutely agree. But it's interesting that the difference of dichotomy between the two.
And we look at one of the terms, just for everybody here, I like to provide recommendations. When I say eCPI, it's like an effective CPI. Yeah. So it's like your organic blended based on user acquisition, but also rankings, based on other ways of getting people to talk about it. Could be TV commercials. I love watching commercials at midnight. It's always mobile games and mobile apps trying to figure out this equation. And it's how you acquire. But we would think about it from the beginning. We would look at the genre, look at comparable metrics, and then actually build games to hit those metrics, and we wouldn't release until we were positive we would hit them, or we had the hunch we would, like the trajectory, or we'd kill the game.
And speaking from my experience at Kabam, we would focus on transaction velocity as well as conversion. So you buy currency, you spend currency, and how long does that process take? And in the strategy game in particular, it's actually critical, right, for them to keep spending, having sinks that can keep them engaged. And in some ways, the monetization design is the game design. People are optimizing around what money to spend the most effectively, right? And that becomes the game. And game designers hate this stuff, right? Because it's not really game design, it's actually monetization design for the game. But that's what we were optimizing against for both Marvel Contest of Champions as well as the strategy games.
Yeah, the economists are the most fun to talk about. They're like the hidden gem that no one likes to talk about.
Well, we have Philip Black on the podcast, if you listen to it, and he is almost a gross, economist. Like that's all he talks about, optimizing around that, and I think it's a little bit more nuanced than his take. But all right, on the other side of it, we're starting to see that Google has been focusing on player experience as of late with some metrics. And what's going on with that? Like how developers should be thinking about these type of player experience metrics, and why is Google kind of focusing on that these days?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, take a step back, there's a lot of trends, not just Google or Apple, but I'm sure you could talk to some on PC and console.
Sure.
And it's hard to understand what they're really happening, but one item that every game developer seems to be thinking about that has a game in the stores, A&Rs. A&Rs is big, not necessarily because of player experience, although it does affect it. It's when an app freezes and the player can no longer play a game or is forced to abandon it and come back. Google monitors that, at least a portion of it. They monitor crashes, which is the age-old paradigm. They monitor other metrics. The question is why now? And they expose it now in the Google Play console. And on a correlative note, they're pretty opaque there, but if you start hitting that above a threshold for a certain period of time, you could either lose ranking, definitely piss them off and maybe not get featured, then your eCPI goes down. We've even seen some apps start getting pulled.
I was going to say you can get delisted.
Yeah, which is the kiss of death. I'd like to think that they're doing it out of potentially a differentiation. Apple is the most opaque company when it comes to apps and everything around it and player experience. They tout that they're great at player experience, and the phone is amazing. But Google, I think, is trying to use it as a way to actually penetrate the App Store kind of mentality. And they're releasing these so that they can be part of the conversation. And so they can say that they're helping game developers, and I hope they are. Part of the reason Embrace exists, just so folks know, is Google is great at identifying these issues, but they're not great at solving them. It's a totally different team. And so when you identify an A&R or a crash, your developers are definitely going off on wild goose chases or living with these problems, which then affect your ability to actually build a flywheel and build great player experiences. So us, our competitors, we're trying to help every individual engineer out there solve these problems so that Google becomes a friend as opposed to an enemy.
I feel like I'm being sold while I'm up here. But no, coming from the engineering and production side, even in the role where we're more gaming adjacent at Backbone, A&Rs and crash rates are one of the things I look at every single day. Like literally in the morning when I do a dashboard review, I'm looking over again, what is our acquisition funnel, what's our FTUI looking like, and then there's a whole section that's nothing but errors as far as the eye can see. And that was true even on Pokemon Go. If we didn't do that, all we would get would be user complaints. And you don't want that. You don't want users going review bombing you. Well, they're not review bombing, but they're leaving, probably not stellar reviews. And that can stop you. That can literally stop someone from installing the game. And even with Apple to the opaqueness, that's where your own custom monitoring is just as important as looking at what is on the stores. So I highly recommend that that's the first thing. Anybody from an engineering background, that's what you need to watch more than anything else, because once that gets out of control, you can just lose users overnight, word of mouth, the whole 9 yards. It's a poison pill.
No, it's like there's a death
there
spiral.
is. Oh, 100%.
Once you hit that mess up on that equation, your game is dead. You just don't know it yet. In fact, player experience, I think, is kind of three things. It's the core experience, which we've talked about, like how do you get a user, building features, getting them to engage through new content. The monetization, which I agree is sometimes the same thing. And then the stability. And your engineering teams have a hard time figuring out which one to prioritize. And they always obviously want to work on stability if they can solve them, which it's really hard. But they all affect that core flywheel. And so
100%.
deciding which ones to work on, it's friggin' hard.
All right, for the last couple minutes, what is the best of breed games out there in terms of balance, gameplay, and user UI and UX?
Oh, I get to go first?
Yes.
Oh, no.
Because I give a contrarian.
Oh, that's true. We are, yeah. So, in my opinion, right now, I actually am the one that's standing out to me above all else is actually Helldivers 2, because it's a premium game. You pay, I think it's like $30, and then the war bonds, both the normal battle pass or war bond. I always call them battle passes. Sorry. And then the premium ones are always going to be there. So you always have an opportunity to start later after your friends have talked to you about the game. You can come back, you can buy those war bonds. I think that's really neat compared to some other ones. I think like Halo Infinite tried it, but you have to buy it within the timeline and then you get to keep it. And most battle passes rotate if you don't get in on that season, so you lose out on all that wonderful cosmetics and or items or whatever. But the other thing that Helldivers is doing, which I think is really well done, is you can earn all the currency if you spend more time in the game. And so if you do a whole mission or a set of missions, you can find the medals, the currency, the whole 9 yards, which is great. So you're keeping people in your flywheel longer, and you're also having people explore your game, get into the system a lot more. So I actually think they're doing a real good job for console, that is. On mobile, I'm going to have to think about it, actually.
I was trying to think about it, and I think mobile, there's no great examples right now. I think games are great. The Monopoly Go is amazing, and I'm going to talk about why. Monopoly Go is amazing because it's a tried and true genre. They just executed on it amazingly well. And you can look at the press releases on how well they're doing. So the contrarian, I think, in mobile is there's an opportunity to potentially bring, that's part of the reason I was asking earlier about real-time shooters and MOBA. There are opportunities to bring other genres, but right now all the genres are the same. They're just opportunity to do better. And maybe it's because we're early innings in mobile, in the grand scheme of things, and there still is the upside. I'm trying to be positive.
I would argue that we're in a mature part of the market, and so it's just a lot of iterations similar to console.
It's total iteration. The question is, why are they iterating still at such a good clip, and new games as well?
Well, I'll leave it off. I think FIFA and Madden, despite a lot of complaints about it, really does a good job in the sense that they have a premium game, plus they have the option of entering into a huge monetization, pay-to-win type mechanic. So opt-in, premium plus opt-in. I think that's smart.
For mobile, I hate the premium opt-in, but yeah. But I think NBA 2K, they're on the right path. We were kind of talking about
it's taken them 15 years to figure it out?
But now they're on the right path.
No, I don't know about that.
I
Anyway.
like the trajectory. I'd like to see the next version.
Okay.
Luckily, they come out every year.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're out of time.
I was going to ask one curveball to both of you. If I don't
sure.
mind. So we're now watching also cross-progression games come into the mobile market, right? So we're seeing that with Warzone that's about to drop, right? They made their announcement, it's coming to mobile. What are your thoughts on the fact that we're now watching console get into mobile and be on the same playing field?
It's going to be a disaster.
Okay.
Warzone in particular is going to be a fucking disaster.
Okay.
Because they made that game, not the Chinese. So yeah, I'll put that in.
And on that note, I have to be the bad guy again. Thank you very much.
On that note, we gotta go.
I also hate the premium plus IAP thing because I think it just when I used to do that kind of stuff, we found that it capped the long-term spend per user. It has a psychological impact on long-term spend, but your flywheel example absolutely keep people in the flywheel as much as possible, and I'm thoroughly with that. But guys, thank you so much. It was absolutely insightful as ever.